Hi, I'm Vinny Mac. In this video, I want to discuss my spiritual journey, so to speak. How, of all things, creating a YouTube channel about men's issues eventually led me to rethink Christianity. Allow me to explain. Throughout my entire life, I've noticed double standards against men and the negative portrayals of men in the media. And these were things that always got under my skin. For the longest time, it seemed like I was the only one to ever notice these things. Fast forward to 2010, and that's when I decided to create a YouTube channel about this. I called it The Ignored Gender, and I started uploading. It was like a form of therapy, a way to get things off my chest. Along the way, I've watched other YouTube channels who created content similar to mine. One big channel in particular was Pinegrove33, and he actually opened my eyes to the fact that men's issues is a left-right issue. Before watching his channel, I never really thought about politics at all. I couldn't even tell you what the difference between a Democrat and a Republican was. But ever since watching his content and immersing myself more into the world of politics, I wised up. And I too started creating videos about some other political topics, not just men's issues. It was at that moment that I realized that I was a libertarian. I've always felt strongly about issues such as the income tax and affirmative action, but in my younger and more naive days, I never really thought about these as political issues. I also sat down and started to really give some thought to issues that I never truly thought about before. For example, I remember for most of my life I considered myself to be pro-choice on the abortion issue. But once I actually stopped and gave it some thought, I reconsidered my position and became pro-life. This happens to be the Christian stance on the issue, but my decision had absolutely nothing to do with religion. I'll leave a card here to the video that I made on this topic if you're interested in watching. So yeah, I still considered myself to be an atheist at that time. Fast forward to 2012. Just as I was subscribed to channels like Pinegrove33, I was also subscribed to atheist YouTubers because all my life I was an atheist. But after having watched several atheist YouTubers such as Healthy Addict, Christina Rad, Lacey Green, and Ghost of Day in Person, I began to notice something. When it came to issues on religion, I would wholeheartedly agree with them. But if they talked about pretty much anything else, I would vehemently disagree with them, because they were clearly very left-wing. I always asked myself, how is it that these leftist atheist YouTubers can be so on point and logical about religion, but be way off when it comes to just about everything else? And on the flip side, I thought that conservatives were on point for the most part, but were so illogical about religion. This led me to consider that maybe, just maybe, there was more to Christianity than I initially gave it credit for. Perhaps this is yet another issue that I just need to really sit down and reflect on, and I may change my mind about it. Hey, it's happened before. I seem to have more in common with Christians than I did with other atheists. Another thing that I noticed with the atheist YouTubers that I subscribe to is that even on the issues of religion that I agreed with them on, I did not like their approach. I remember one video in particular by Ghost of Day in Person where she went up to a couple of teenage Christians who were just peacefully passing out pamphlets, and she was screaming at them, saying something like, "How can you worship a God that allows terrible things to happen?" And I'm sitting there thinking, wow, I see your point, but geez, chill out. They didn't do anything to you. You know, you can't talk to them like human beings. So I had unsubscribed to those particular channels because of how mean-spirited and condescending they were to believers. I still considered myself to be an atheist, but I just couldn't watch their stuff anymore. Now, of course, I'm certainly not saying all atheist YouTubers are like this. For example, I like Cosmic Skeptic. He is very civil and way more open-minded. Fast forward to 2013. As mentioned earlier, I became more politically minded. As such, I took on a newfound interest in history. Now, throughout high school and college, I didn't care about history at all. I used to think, oh, who cares, the past is the past, why are we still talking about it? But I've rethought this position as well. I'll leave links in the video description to a couple of articles from The Art of Manliness on why we should study and be inspired by history. I took it upon myself to take a couple of courses on the history of Western civilization. One course was taught by Jason Jewell, and one was taught by Tom Woods. It was there that I learned how vital Christianity was in the history of Western culture. I started looking into Christian apologetics and following channels like Inspiring Philosophy, TheFuelProject, and Rocky Mysteries videos on Christianity. I also started reading C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity and Mortimer Adler's How to Think About God, and by doing so, I was given a new perspective. I was given new ways to look at the religion and they did have some answers to a few of the common atheist objections. For one thing, my perception of God used to be that he was supposed to be this invisible guy in the sky watching over us. But now I understand that that's not how we're supposed to perceive of God. God is by definition transcendent. He is not of this universe. The best analogy I can think of is God is like an author, and this universe and the people in it is the story's setting and characters. And the character of Jesus would be God writing himself into the story. I also used to think that I needed absolute, undeniable proof of God's existence in order to be convinced. But when you think about it, do you really need concrete, airtight proof for every single solitary belief you have? Aren't some things just common sense? I mean, can you prove that stealing is wrong, or do you just know it? Besides, since God is by definition transcendent, then science wouldn't be able to prove God's existence because science can only study that which exists in this universe. Now, none of this proves that God does exist, of course, but it did help relax what it would take to convince me that he exists. I no longer require absolute, undeniable proof. However, I would still like some convincing evidence. Something to point towards God's existence being probable, not just possible. For me personally, some of the more compelling arguments include the argument from St. Thomas Aquinas that a necessary being must exist. An uncaused first cause, if you will. Another compelling argument is that of the moral law. I do believe in objective morality. A sense of morality is one of the things that makes human beings unique. We have a sense of what we ought to do and what we ought not to do. A dog wouldn't think, I shouldn't have bit that mailman today. Or one squirrel wouldn't think, that other squirrel spent all that time and energy gathering those nuts. It was wrong of me to come by and steal them all for myself. I am also a firm believer that we should not be living a hedonistic lifestyle. We as humans do not need to be slaves to our desires. We have the mental awareness to understand that just because something may feel good in the moment, it may not be good for us. We can indulge in excess consumption. We can be gluttons. We can pig out on all kinds of candies and donuts. But we know that this will not be good for us, even though they may taste very good. You should govern your passions, not be governed by your passions. Another thing I often thought about, even when I was a little kid, was the existence of a soul. Even when I was young as 8, I remember thinking, why am I me? Why am I not somebody else? Why wasn't I a person who was born in the 1800s? Why was I not born in the 2000s? Why was I the last child born and not the first or the middle? I don't really know how to describe this, but it's what makes you, you. I suppose you could call it a soul. I also used to be a strict materialist. I pretty much thought that what you see is what you get, that there is nothing beyond the physical, tangible world. But there are things that exist that we cannot see or touch. Concepts like truth, justice, beauty, honesty. And to play on this point even further, look at the world of mathematics. Math is a beautiful and harmonious world in itself. Do imaginary numbers exist in the real world? Technically, no. However, without imaginary and complex numbers, electrical engineering would not be what it is today. So we can effectively treat mathematics as though it really does exist, All this is just to say that there is indeed more to the world than meets the eye. So I don't consider myself to be materialist anymore. So there you have it. My journey in a nutshell. Making videos on YouTube about men's issues eventually got me to think more politically, which led me to want to learn history, which got me to take courses on the history of Western civilization, which got me to see how important Christianity is to our history and our culture, and how my values closely align to Christian values, which got me to look into Christian apologetics, which opened up my mind a lot more, which now led me to where I am right now. An agnostic who identifies as a cultural Christian who is still in research mode learning more about the faith. All in all, I still do not share in the faith. There are certain things in the Bible that I just have a hard time believing. For instance, I have a hard time believing that any humans have lived for over 900 years, or that Moses parted the Red Sea so that he could get the Hebrews out of Egypt. However, I am more open-minded to the possibility that God exists. As I said before, I consider myself to be an agnostic, but definitely a cultural Christian. I think society as a whole would do better if it adhered to Christian values. As for me, if I were to become a Christian, I'm not sure which denomination I would be. However, I will say that after watching the Fuel Project's Know Your Enemy, if I were to become a Christian, I would definitely not be a Catholic. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. And if you would like to see more videos from me, please hit that subscribe button and ring that bell to get notified of future uploads. I'll leave links in the end screen for more videos that you might like to watch. And until next time, I'm out.